G'day champions. So in this video, I'm going to be rebuilding a little outboard motor. A very good video to follow along with if you're going to be rebuilding your motor. This block in particular is a 6, 8 or 9.8 horsepower Tohatsu / Mercury. As you can see, I've got all my parts here ready to go. Really excited to whack this motor back together. All right, let's get into it, guys. So with your honing, what you're after is about a 45-degree crosshatch inside your bore, and what that does is it helps seat the new rings, and also these little scuffs in there hold a little bit of oil and it helps lubricate the pistons inside the bores and the rings and all that sort of stuff. So after I've degreased, blown down and dried a block, I try and just coat the inside of the bores with a little bit of 2-stroke oil quite quickly, because surface rust forms in these very, very quickly. Kind of within 20 minutes or so, you'll start to see a little bit of surface rust. And if you just give these a light coating of 2-stroke oil, it sort of stops that problem. So I like to do that. Probably wear a glove too, instead of just using your finger. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and check the ring gaps. So that's the gap between each end of this ring inside the bore when it's sitting in there. So you can see the ends of these rings have a little tongue on them, which sits on the piston. There's a little locator pin. Keep the ring from spinning right round. So I'm going to put them the right way up, which is downward inside there, and then we'll check this ring gap with a feeler gauge and make sure that we've got the right tolerances. So from factory on this particular motor, different for every motor, make sure you know the specs on your rings when you're checking your ring gaps. This one is 7 to 13 thou for a new ring install, or 0.18 to 0.33 millimeters between the end of this ring when it's in there. And the reason for the gap is when this heats up, obviously the ring metal will expand and this gap will become smaller. So if it's not the right gap in here, very high chance that your ring will lock up and cause a massive problem with your motor. So anyway, I'll just sit that in there. Use an old piston just to push it down inside the bore slightly. And with my feeler gauge, why don't we try a 0.25? Yeah, well that fits through the gap. I'll do a close up on this now so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so this is a 0.25 feeler gauge. Okay, so that fits through that gap just. So I'll go up to a 0.279. We'll have a look at that. Okay, that one is in the gap, and it just feels like it's touching each side. So I'm happy with the 0.279. And what I'll do is, I know that that's the bottom cylinder, and I will take that ring off and put it straight on the bottom piston, and I will do the second one, make sure that's good, put it on the bottom piston, and then I'll start on the top one. Ring gap these ones, put them straight on the top cylinder. So all right, we'll keep going with that. Okay, so all of the new piston rings are installed on those two pistons. They all were gapped at 0.279, so I'm very happy with that actually. So the question is, what do you do if you have a ring that the gap is too tight? What I've done is, this is an old ring. I've installed that in the bore, and at the moment that feeler gauge is tight on each side of that ring at 0.660. So let's see if we can just take a little bit off that old ring. So the way we'll do that is basically a bit of wet and dry sandpaper, the way I do it anyway, and I'll just squeeze that against the sandpaper and rub the sandpaper in and out of that end of the little ends and then put it in there and try and get the gap we're after. So let's just say we want it to be 0.75. So yeah, we'll do that. So I've got a little bit of wet and dry sandpaper folded over, and I will just gently press that ring on each side of it. It really doesn't take much. Just a tiny little skim off those. All right, we'll check that now. Okay, so we've got 0.762 of a millimeter here. And yeah, so now that is tight in there. So anyway, that's how to do it. I'm not going to spend much time messing about with that, but yeah, that's how you increase the gap a little bit on your rings. Okay, so I'm ready to lower this assembly into the block. I'm just going to put the new oil seal onto the crank. Let's put a little bit of 2-stroke oil inside there. Awesome. And I'm just going to put a little smear of 2-stroke oil around these rings. I've already put a few drops on each of the bearings. So I'll just do the rings quickly. So the first few minutes of a freshly rebuilt motor running with a nicely honed cross-hatched bore and new rings, there's a fair bit of friction that goes on, so I just like to make sure that I've got a decent amount of oil on my rings so they can seat nicely and go from there. All right, let's lower this in. Okay, so my bores also have a thin smear of oil inside them, so I've made sure my rings are in the right spot to locate with the little pins. I don't need to put a ring compressor on this particular motor because the back of the bores have a chamfer on them, so the rings should compress as I wiggle the pistons. There we go. There we go. And then I'm just going to make sure all of my bearing retainer clips and seals all sit in the right spots as I lower the whole assembly. Also the bearings here have a locating pin on them. Make sure that's not poking downwards. Leave them all sort of poking up for now, and then as it sits down you can lower them into their little groove. Awesome. Okay, so these little bearings, I'm just going to spin them down and make sure that little pin sits down into its groove. There we go. And with this top seal, make sure it's up. Just gently push it up to the top of the block there where it's supposed to seat. You do not want it pressed down like that. It's not where it's supposed to be. So just bring it back up to seat up to the top of that. Awesome. Okay. Now we can go ahead and start assembling the crankcase halves and this lower seal and stuff. Okay, now that I'm happy with the assembly here and everything's installed in the block, I can go ahead and put some crankcase sealant on this whole surface here, and then assemble the crankcase halves. This is where all of the bolts that I took out, I know, labeling these things correctly, I know all these bolts are for this, and it makes it so easy. So let's go ahead and install some flange sealant around here, and then we'll bolt this together. I just like to get a few, it's quite a thick sort of product, but just get a few sort of dobs of this stuff around the place, and I'll just spread it out with my finger. You should wear a glove. Make sure you get it right into all these corners. Okay, now we've got that flange sealant on. Everything is very clean. We've cleaned up all the parts very well. This is ready to go on. Awesome. I'll get the gasket for this. lower seal, and yeah, install that at the same time. I won't tighten those 2 bolts until all the crankcase half bolts are tightened. I will make sure this is pushed in though with the gasket on, and then I'll tighten those after all the crankcase half bolts are tightened. So with this particular motor, I need to install the reed plate cover to put the crankcase half bolts through. So I'll quickly go ahead and do that. I'll just install these gaskets, put a little bit of sealant on them first, and then tighten up the bolts. So I don't use any silicon based gasket sealant, so I use a permanent flexible sealant for my gaskets. Again, make sure all your parts are super clean. Okay, do this next gasket and then the reed plate cover. Okay. So ignore my reed plate, it is slightly modified. And yeah, same with the reed plate cover. That's just because I'm doing a little bit of a performance build here. But yeah, so that's all good. Make sure all your crankcase half bolts are nice and clean. All right, now we'll torque them all down to specs. Okay, so I can install that. I won't tighten these until all of these are torqued down. So I've just tightened up all these crankcase half bolts just till they're just touching. I have not tightened them down at all yet. I'm going to grab my torque wrench now. This is a little one that I've got, and I'm going to start tightening these down to spec. So on this one, the spec on my 6mm bolts is 6.5 foot-pounds. So yeah, I'll just convert that to inch-pounds on this, and yeah, start torquing them down. I won't start at that full torque straight away. I work my way up to it. I'll start pretty light on to start with. And the way you torque, crankcase halves down, power head heads down, is you start in the middle and you work your way out in a circular motion. So let's say I start on this bolt. I'll start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So always working out from the center. Okay, so with a torque wrench, you're going to hear a little click once it reaches its torque. Okay. Little click there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10. Okay, so I'll just continue that process until I reach my torque for the crankcase halves, and yeah, simple as that. Just double checking our final torques. It's good. Awesome. So you should see a little bit of that crankcase half sealant, the flange sealant just coming out, tiny bit around the place. Okay, now I can go ahead and tighten this one up, and then that's the crankcase halves done. Now I can jump onto the exhaust cover. So it's time to install the exhaust plate and exhaust plate cover. So I've got my new gaskets here. I'm just going to apply some gasket sealing compound to these. Again, not using anything that is silicon based. I'm going to be using this Permatex Aircraft permanently flexible gasket sealant on this. So I'll just seal these up and put them on, and we'll put the bolts in and torque them down. Same thing for that gasket, and then we'll put the cover on. Okay, so I know from the pictures I took as I disassembled this that the one with the little lug on it goes there. That's why it's important to yeah, take some pictures before you pull stuff apart. And this part here also tells me the torque, so 0.9 kilograms per meter. So that's about 78 inch-pounds. So you can find all the converters on, online if you've got, a torque wrench that won't have, kilogram meters. And also this one tells you in which order to tighten the bolts. And again, it's kind of circles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So yeah, circles from the center outwards. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and make sure I'm happy with the torque. All right, that's good. All right, let's get onto the head now. So with these smaller motors, I don't mind giving the head a quick sand just to make sure it's completely flat. So I've got a sheet of 12mm thick aluminium here and a piece of, probably 120 to 240 grit paper. And if I just press down and sand that like that, you'll see, it starts knocking off the high spots. And you want to see, here's one I prepared earlier. So you can see that once it's completely flat, all of the surfaces are shiny. Anyway, that's what I do. You need to definitely make sure that it's completely flat, whatever you're sanding on, and go from there. Okay, so I'll just install the new thermostat. A lot of people remove these thinking that they're doing the right thing. But it's so important to run your thermostat. It allows the head to get to the right temperature for, the motor to run properly. So definitely install your thermostat. No gasket sealant required on that. Awesome. So I'll just go ahead and put all my new bolts in, and we'll torque that back down as we've done in the past in this video. And again, I'm starting from the center, working my way out. Double check. Cool. All right, so that's basically power head reassembled. Probably clean this up, give it a spray. Can't wait. Awesome. So I'll just put the gasket on. I've already put some gasket sealing compound on that, and then we'll drop the power head onto the midsection. So these little motors are quite good. They've got little locating lugs here and here. So everything you put on sort of centers itself. So there's those holes inside the base of the power head too. So once you sit that down, everything locates without you messing about, which is nice. As you can see, I've sprayed up this power head. Make it very nice and pretty. I'll just drop this in. Make sure all of our cables are out of the way. There you go, that's it. So I'll go and now just put the 6 power head bolts in, and that will secure the power head down, and then I can continue to put the electrics on, carby, spark plugs, all that sort of stuff, and get into running it in. The then you need to go ahead and reconnect your throttle cables. So I'll probably adjust these once I've got all these linkages back, carburetor connected and stuff. I'll adjust these to make sure that I'm achieving full throttle. I'm going to put the stator back on. There you go. Then I have 4 mounting screws, which I'll install now. I'm just going to put a tiny dob of thread locker on these stator screws, just so they don't rattle out, but you can remove them later if need be. Awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to bolt on the CD pack on the side. I know exactly where everything needs to go, as I have pictures before I pull this motor apart. So very important, before you pull the motor down, to make sure you got pictures of what it looked like before you started. All right, I'll bolt this on now. So now I've put that power pack on. I've got all my wires running over to this side. I've got my kill switch wires. So with these, everything is color coded, so it's very easy. So we've got these wires coming from the stator, green and a black. Got the green and the black there. And then we have the kill switch, which is the brown, which goes into there, and the black there. So yeah, double socket for the black. Very easy. Clip all that together, color coded, and yeah, all the electrical stuff's reconnected. And now that stator's on, I've made sure that I've got my little key on the top of the crankshaft, and I'm going to put my flywheel on. Line up that keyhole, sit that down. All right. Now I can, put my nut on the top of that and tighten it down. So with the flywheel nut that bolts the flywheel down to the top of the crankshaft, there are specific torques for that nut. If you don't have a big torque wrench, they need to be pretty freaking tight. So you can just try and hold the flywheel and tap the end of a breaker bar or something like that and tighten this up. Don't go too much, you don't want to break anything, but it is way better if you can use a torque wrench and torque that down to spec. It's a much better way to do it, which I'll be doing now. Now that flywheel is tightened down, I can put my pull start assembly on. I've got the original bolts actually just taped in this one. Often I'll tape the original bolts into the parts as I pull them off, because you know where things like this are located, like this cable lug. So that's going to sit there. Obviously support those guys. Okay, now that pull start assembly's on, we'll connect the can't start in gear lever and clip that on. All right, that's on. That basically just lets that tab come down. If you're in forward, it won't allow you to pull start when you're in forward gear, only in neutral. So that's a good little safety device. Okay, so next we'll install the carburetor. There's videos on my channel about rebuilding one of these, and it's always a good idea to give them a freshen up as you are rebuilding your motor. So there's just two 10mm bolts here. Make sure your carburetor gasket is good, or buy a new one. So there's just those two 10mm bolts to tighten up, and then we can connect, I'll zoom in a little bit, the choke here So just roll the choke in there, clip the retainer on, same with the carburetor. Goes in there, roll that little retainer over, clip that on, and then you've got all your linkages, choke and throttle. So yeah, I'll just tighten up these two, connect the fuel line, and then should be ready to give this a run. Beautiful. All right, she's back together.